Thank you, Adila. And can we do a roll call? Here?
Here. Here.
All right, our first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at it? Are there any questions or concerns with the agenda?
Nope.
If not, there are no changes to today's meeting, and we will proceed as noted.
Do we need a second?
Do we need a vote? Okay. All right, so we're going to do the land acknowledgement. Sula?
Okay.
Thank you.
Land acknowledgement and acknowledgement of the contributions of the enslaved. We take time to acknowledge that the land we meet on is the traditional homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Odawa. This land also served as an important meeting place for Miami, Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, Anoka, Sac, Fox, Peoria, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and other tribal nations. This land has long been a center for indigenous people to gather, trade, and maintain kinship ties. Located at the intersection of several great waterways, the region has become the site of travel and prosperity. We acknowledge Evanston and John Evans are tied to the massacre of the Arapaho and Cheyenne for railroads and western expansion, upon which John Evans developed his wealth and founded Evanston. This land was violently taken under settler colonialism through genocide and open warfare, and the region that is now Illinois and Chicagoland is still home to thousands of Native people who are actively struggling for sovereignty, self-determination, and justice. The genocidal acts of settler colonialism extended to peoples of Africa and their enslaved descendants. Despite Illinois eventually prohibiting slavery, slavery was an accepted practice before and after statehood. The vestiges of slavery remain present throughout the United States and directly affect the descendants of enslaved peoples, descendants who helped define the African diaspora, rich and heterogeneous communities descended from African peoples. The genocidal patterns of violence against peoples of African descent and indigenous people have been replicated to exclude and harm people from many intersecting marginalized identities: religious, minoritized, disabled, and LGBTQ identified peoples, BIPOC, and people of color writ large in the United States. These patterns of violence demonstrate that the pursuit to end state-sanctioned violence against BIPOC is a daily struggle for liberation from continued social, political, and economic anti-Black racism and oppression. Today, we acknowledge that we are living, breathing, loving, grieving, laughing, and sharing space on unceded territory. May we learn to honor the historical and contemporary presence and power of the people and their belief that we must be caretakers of the lands and waters for the livelihood of future generations. The land that surrounds us is part of who we are. It reflects our histories. It is within District 65's responsibility as an academic institution to disseminate knowledge about Black and Indigenous peoples and marginalized peoples writ large, consistent with our commitment to equity. We will work towards sharing truth and promoting healing for the sake of our children and families. It is important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us to reside on the land and to seek to understand our place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in the past tense or only in a historical context. Colonialism is a current ongoing process, and we need to understand our present participation. We encourage everyone consuming this message to continue expanding their knowledge and reduce their harm through awareness of local mutual aid models for survival and engagement with online and local resources such as the Chicago American Indian Community Collaborative and the Shorefront Legacy Center. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, do we have anybody signed up for public comment today? Joel? Yeah. Members of the public are welcome and invited to address the Personnel, Buildings and Grounds and Finance Committee during open public meetings. Speakers are discouraged from using the public comment period to air specific concerns about staff members, being mindful that the public comment period is not a suitable forum for fact-finding or resolution of disputes. Rather, we encourage members of the public who have concerns about specific district employees to follow district communication guidelines found in the student handbook. Please remember to state your name and that you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Also note that it is not customary for the committee to respond to public comments. The best way to correspond with members is by emailing us at schoolboard@district65.net. All right, Joel.
Thank you. My name is Joel Freeman. I'm here to say thank you for giving an audience to the District 65 Green Team, who have put a lot of effort into getting this audience with you. I've been a resident of Evanston for 30 years. 16 of those were helping shepherd my 2 daughters through District 65 schools and through ETHS. I think the color of my hair gives away how long that's been. And one of the things that they expressed concern about, this was a little later in their teenage years, was the concern about climate change. And the thought occurred to me that they weren't learning any of that until very, very late in their lives. And I'm not saying we have to saturate everybody from the beginning, but some of the seeds, I believe some of the seeds need to be planted that we have a planet that needs help and we can help it, and that there is some hope, and that there are good things here worth saving. And if we can embed some of those ideas early on, and it doesn't have to be a process that comes at the expense of anything else that the district is doing. It can run in parallel with all kinds of other activities. And so just as sort of a preface to the Green Team presentation, I feel that this is something that can start to permeate the District 65 culture in addition to all the other things I know you guys have to take care of. But it's surrounding us everywhere else you go. In my career, corporate businesses are taking this on. The city of Evanston is taking this on. I'm taking it on personally with things I do at home. And I think it's a good thing that the district can also embark on the same journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sevdelina Georgieva. I'm here again to support the Green Team of all schools in the district. I am a member of the Washington Green Team, Washington Elementary School. And I have 2 kids. Currently, one is still in Washington, the other is already in Nichols. And for a couple of years already, being volunteering at the Green Team and at the Washington School, I see that it's a very slow and arduous process, little steps towards some really steady curriculum or a person who can really represent all the ideas that Green Teams want to implement. And what I see is that I've always regarded the schools like leaders and the teachers and the educators as the pivots of knowledge, of progress, of new ideas, of everything that should lead ahead. And they should be the one that should stretch their hands and say, hey, parents, caregivers, you students, support us. But they should be the first one to develop all that. And that's why I find it a little bit slow and difficult for all these 3, 4, even 5 years that a handful of Green Team members are trying to reach out to the district, on a district level, to teachers here and there, to try to reach the principals in order to implement something that should come actually from the leaders of the district, the ones that should actually spread the knowledge, the modern education. Because let's face it, nowadays it's inevitable to teach science or social studies or biology without interlocking it with the climate change or with the environmental impact we are facing nowadays. And the other thing, we should really have a really good developed curriculum, which should be not here and there as small presentations, but it should be interlocked in the curriculum and every teacher should be very well trained and educated so they know and understand why they should actually forward it to the children, to their students. And that's actually when we see some schools, we tried and started the waste stations, the composting, the recycling, but without the support of an educated staff, without the support of an educated and trained teachers that have already explained to the students why we are doing this. They have to understand why, and then the school should be the first perfect exhibition of that, of recycling, how the cafeteria should look like, and that should be connected. We cannot just do patchwork, a little bit recycling, a little bit composting, without these things should be connected with one very well worked out curriculum, trained staff, personnel, even the people who are helping in the cafeteria, they should be also very well trained and know and help. And then the students can see the example. It is the teachers that are telling them. They show them the classrooms. They should, even parallel to the multiplication table even, should be a poster explaining the recycling, explaining why we should compost, why we should do that. Because we cannot just leave our kids totally ignorant about what's going on and then tell them, you can do this or that, without explaining them why, the importance of this. And also showing them ways that, again, the district educators, the leaders, the teachers, they should be the one that should guide them, lead them, explain to them, teach them how to face the reality, because this is the reality we are living in. And they should be well prepared. My time is over, sorry, I'm almost done. That's more or less, I'm repeating myself, but that's to emphasize the importance that they should be the one that should give the tools of the children to know what they can do now to help the environment hazards we are facing every day, the climate change, which is, of course, it's a reality. And then these kids should know later how to maybe to invent even new, more better things, better ways to handle the situation for the future generations. But I find it really lost years, these couple of years, I find it really lost years, and we really should act now with your support again. That's why I'm here, because as I said, it has been for years, the school is actually the essence of knowledge, of spreading education, and all connected with the science and the modern teaching. We cannot just say it doesn't matter. We can do a little bit here, a little bit of that. And we have the city of Evanston, CARP goals. We are part of this city. We cannot just say, okay, this is the city, we're the district. Everything should be aligned. When the kids and the parents and the caregivers or whoever goes around and they see whether to the school or to the street of Evanston, they can see that we are all in this together. We have one goal, and this is the goal we all should aiming at.
Thank you.
And we cannot just leave our kids like that, being unaware of what's going on around us.
Well, the good news
our,
is
pardon?
The good news is we have more of this on the agenda today. So
sorry,
thank you.
Sorry, I got too emotional. Sorry, but as a parent, I'm just like, you know, and as a volunteering and seeing that there are a lot of good things that are going to the right direction. We just need to combine everything together and align it together with the CARP goals. And there are priorities we should focus on, because there are enough funds nowadays. I'm sure you will see in the presentation of the green team later. There are possibilities and enormous possibilities for the school really to start working in this direction as a guiding leader in this
Thank
way.
you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Our next item, or anybody else for public comment? Thank you, sorry.
I'm not a millennial, but I feel like one because I'm pulling it up on my phone. Just does not count for my 3 minutes, right? Okay. Thank you all for your time and attention. My name is Jeannie Albina. I'm speaking tonight as a former District 65 educator. Shout out to my principal, Mr. Kilgatti. I'm a proud Latina mama. I have 2 TWE students at Washington. I realize I can take the mask off. I'm an Evanston taxpayer and an increasingly anxious consumer of climate-related news. So we have opportunities as a school district to enact changes that would meet 3 bottom lines: financial, environmental, and moral. By decarbonizing our schools and switching to solar-powered electricity, for example, the district can save thousands of dollars a year, which addresses a financial bottom line, reduces our district's carbon emissions, which meets our environmental bottom line, and gives us a shot at leaving the children we are currently educating with a healthy and habitable planet, the moral bottom line. When I taught at Hiram Belding Elementary School in Chicago, I spearheaded the recycling program, and within a few months, we had all of the classrooms in our K-8 school of about 650 students recycling paper and cardboard. We were able to change our 4 dumpsters worth of landfill to just 1 landfill and 3 recycling. With recycling removed free of charge, our school sent less waste to the landfill and saved thousands, literally more than $1,000 of money that could be redirected to supplies and programs that directly help students. Triple bottom line met. We have similar opportunities now in District 65. Some require more investment of time and energy than others, but you have a student body that is motivated and very much personally invested in environmental sustainability, as well as a growing team of community volunteers who are ready to help sort compost, teach kids how to recycle, encourage waste-free lunchrooms, and I will personally volunteer my time to help with any paperwork needed to get our buildings on solar power, because I eat paperwork for breakfast. I know that the work of educators in classrooms is more challenging now than ever, so let's not put any more pressures on teachers and TAs who serve our kids every day. Let's make decisions from the top that can show our commitment to financial responsibility, environmental sustainability, and moral rectitude. It's the least we can do for the kids.
Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, so our 4th agenda item is the approval of our meeting minutes from August 2021. Has everyone reviewed them? Any questions about the minutes? All right, so I move that to approve the August 2021 Personnel, Buildings and Grounds and Finance Committee meeting minutes.
Second? Yes. Yes.
Yes. Without further ado, our green team presentation is item number 5. Sylvia, Beth, and Marie. And can I ask, did you also give us these that are here today? Great, thank you. Time's up.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Beth Flintoft, and I'm the parent of a 2nd grader and 5th grader in the district. Is it working? Oh, just slide it out. That would help. Okay, thank you. 5 years ago, a group of parents and staff came together to work to make sustainability a priority for the district. Today, we have green teams at almost every district school, working to create healthier and more environmentally sustainable school communities for our children through education, awareness, and action. Our hope then, as well as for today, is that the school board and administration will issue a commitment to plan and prepare for the climate crisis. Specifically for this committee to commit to investing in healthy green schools, by beginning the development of a roadmap to decarbonize our current buildings and transportation, and if a fifth ward school should be built, ensuring that the building is a net zero energy school. We hope you'll see that these investments will be valuable to all students and that investing in healthy green schools is central to advancing equity.
Hi, I'm Marika Villa, and I'm the parent of two kids that have gone through the TUI program. I'm Puerto Rican, and Spanish is our first language in home, so TUI was a natural choice. I'm also an obstetrician gynecologist with a special interest in environmental health, and I'm here because climate change is a matter of health. So on the slide, you can see the CDC infographic that details the different effects of climate change on health. And as you would imagine, it affects the most vulnerable first. And that can look like anything from the student who is bused and therefore is at increased risk for air pollution and asthma attacks. It can look like the communities of color that we know are disproportionately impacted by flooding and therefore at an increased risk for waterborne illness from sewage backing up into their homes right here in Chicago. And it can look like the landscaping worker who's forced to work outside and is therefore at increased risk for heat-related illness and even death. And if for 1 second we think that death is too dramatic, it doesn't happen here, all we need to do is think back to the 1995 heat wave in Chicago, which is detailed in the documentary Cooked, that killed almost 800 people. Some of them were put into mass graves, most of them from communities of color. So because climate change affects vulnerable communities first, when we take actions toward climate change, we're automatically putting equity in the center of what we're doing. And I mean equity on all levels, racial, socioeconomic, and generational. Because while we can sit here and debate whether we're gonna leave a literal hot mess for our kids to deal with, they're not gonna have any choice but to actually deal with it in the future. So fortunately, we live in a very progressive city, and in 2018, Evanston approved the Climate Action and Resilience Plan, which details a bold vision that both protects the health of its most vulnerable and prioritizes acting against climate change. That CARP document calls for decarbonization and zero waste by 2050 and 100% renewable electricity by 2030, which is, yes, just around the corner. So because the district is one of the city's largest employers and because it is the entity responsible for educating its students and future citizens, it has the responsibility not just to lighten its footprint, but to educate students that are climate action aware and ready to be resilient. And we're here today to ask you for your leadership on this. Thank you.
Sylvia Wooler. I've got two kids in 5th grade at Washington School. So toward carbon neutrality, D65 needs a net zero capital plan aligned with CARP so that efficiency, electrification, and renewables can become integrated with necessary upgrades. As systems come to their useful endpoint, they can be replaced with compatible systems that work toward building electrification. And if the electricity is produced from renewables on-site or off-site, this will lead to building decarbonization. These projects can reduce facility operating costs and provide an educational platform for students if incorporated into the curriculum. There are many funding options for these improvements, and in particular, last week's passage of CEJA, the Clean Energy Jobs Act, specifies that 15% of all RECs, renewable energy credits, are earmarked for school solar installations. I'm going to skip this way. So towards renewable electricity, D65 currently receives all their electricity from Constellation, as we understand, whose fuel mix is 95% from coal, nuclear, and natural gas. If the city of Evanston is able to get a great price for an all renewables electricity mix for its residents, then District 65 should be able to as well. There are organizations like the Future Green Energy Consortium, which is a joint initiative to provide members with renewable electric power solutions at no out-of-pocket cost to the school districts. They already work with D39 in Wilmette. They ensure school districts go to the front of the line to receive the lowest supply rates in the industry and get the benefits of government incentive programs. To us, this sounds like a better way to spend $800,000 on electricity annually, and a great initiative toward fossil fuel divestment. So switching to 100% renewable electricity must be done. It's the easiest way to achieve 100% renewable electricity is to switch your supplier. Future Green Energy Consortium can help you achieve this at an estimated 10% savings from when we spoke to them. A better option is to obtain solar energy from local community solar farm. Expected savings are at least 10 to 20%, and Northwestern University, for example, has partnered with Clearway Energy Group and signed up for 11.9 megawatts of Clearway's community solar projects in Illinois. It's the equivalent of taking 2,934 cars off the road each year. It would be very interesting to discuss Northwestern's savings in such partnership. Finally, the simple analysis using Google's Project Sunroof app, that's shown on the slide, shows many of the district's roofs to be optimal for solar installations, especially as roofs need to be replaced. On-site solar can be the most economic option and can be either leased, owned, or a hybrid arrangement. Future Green can also help with this. With the passage of the American Rescue Plan Act, the federal government has now approved $176 billion for K-12 schools in the last 4 months. Allowable uses focus on changing combustion equipment to electrical equipment. This fund addresses persistent inequalities. What's more, the one-time nature of these funds makes them an excellent fit for durable investments in facilities that will provide long-term health benefits and financial savings. Besides the obvious need for urgent, equitable climate action, everything we've looked at shows short and long-term financial gains. There are real returns on investment being advocated by the many organizations we have spoken to, pointing to real schools around the country that are well on their way or achieving net zero buildings. This includes renovations with simple choices of opting out of like-for-like combustion mechanical equipment in favor of electrification. To join this fast-growing schools movement, the district needs a baseline report of all school mechanical equipment and a net zero building plan to achieve 100% electrification by 2030, which is in 8 years. Additionally, $2 million is available from the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation and more from IGEN, the Illinois Clean Energy Network, but only for net zero electrification upgrades. We have also spoken to representatives from both CDAC and the Smart Energy, which is the Smart Energy Design Assistance Center at the University of Illinois, and Block Power, a technology startup that both help large organizations move away from fossil fuels by setting out a capital net zero plan. And then looking at another goal of the CARP plan is to get zero waste by 2050. A major component of waste is food waste, which creates methane gas, a greenhouse gas that's 25% more potent than CO2. Through grassroots efforts by the green teams, we were able to show the cost effectiveness of composting, recycling, and food waste reduction and reducing landfill pickups at a few schools. These case studies were then extrapolated to the schools in the district that had active green teams. We stress that although we saw this as an easy win, this is not equitable and should be regulated by the district to ensure that all schools meet the zero waste by 2050 goal. Our efforts aim to make our kids' lunchrooms low waste, nutritious, and an educational experience. We know that by sorting waste, students learn how to make more thoughtful choices every day, and that small actions can empower, teach, and bring about big changes. It is empowering for students to proactively address climate action every day. Because in the end, it'll be these kids that will need to meet these goals of carbon neutrality by 2050, 100% renewable electricity by 2030, and zero waste by 2050. How they manage to do that will largely depend on how we plan to meet these goals and how we prepare these students for a future that is already evident.
So to recap, for our next steps, we're recommending, our hope is that the scope of work for Cardigan, Clark, and Associates will include data to begin a plan of electrifying and decarbonizing buildings, and this data will need to lead to the District 65 Climate Action Roadmap. Also to consider is hiring a sustainability coordinator. A coordinator would be invaluable. They would work to institutionalize sustainable practices within operations and facilities, identify cost savings and conserving of district resources, serve as a liaison between the schools and families in district, as well as a liaison for the district and the city of Evanston, ensuring that we're meeting the city's CARP goals and much, much more. We also wanted to add here, implementing continuing lunchroom composting for the reasons that Sylvia just mentioned. This was well underway before COVID. We had 11 schools composting before, and we have many right now who are eager to begin again. And as we said, this is an excellent, easy, and daily reminder for our kids to learn and feel and know that they're making a difference. And then finally, we ask that a climate justice lens be used in every decision making. And a couple examples include, for personnel, holding an environmental justice training workshop for staff in the near future. And also, we had to include funding a curriculum that teaches environmental stewardship and justice for K through 5 grades. We know this doesn't fall under the purview of this committee, but it's important to mention that it's critical that today's young people, it's critical that young people who also represent the first generation, where a majority are anxious and angry about climate change. And as our district charts a path forward to address learning loss and bolster social and emotional well-being, students need opportunities to reestablish connection and control, build resilience, and advance towards a prosperous and sustainable future. Many young people understand that they'll bear the future burden of today's decisions when it comes to climate change. And to tackle the inequities that a changing climate threatens to widen, we need to strive not only for all our students to be climate literate, but we also need all our students to be prepared to take action in their community and advance climate justice. And this needs to begin before 6th grade with the Evanston program. And finally, in conclusion, if it will show up, we had a short 2-minute video from K-12 Climate Action, an organization established last year, and it's one of a number of organizations working to support climate action in the education sector. And we thought that this video captured our goals well. So hopefully we can click on the link, and I may have passed it. Adele, is there a way we can play the video? Or that link at the very bottom there on the left? Or no, perhaps not. That's okay. That's fine, no worries. Well, we'll just end with this quotation from a gentleman with a school district in California. Saving energy, reducing greenhouse gases, and improving indoor air quality has to become a national priority. This pandemic should teach us that we need to be prepared for change and be willing to invest in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation today, for the comments from the public comment, and for the conversations prior to today that many of us have had. Any questions? Any committee members?
I think I had just, thank you for the presentation. I had just questions more for the District 65 leadership, I think, about what we're currently doing or what we currently have planned in terms of the facilities planning and communication with the consultants?
Sure. Let me answer that on multiple levels. So we met with the Green Team in early August, if I'm not mistaken, and we are having our first compression session. There's a large set of priorities that we have around the Green Team work, and we know as a district we must find a way to organize it so that it can flow within the structure of our school system. So the compression is Friday. We're having quite a few staff members as well as members from the Green Team to start working on that plan. So that's first. The second thing, there's some work that has happened in the past, as it was mentioned, with composting at our schools, and we do plan to extend that throughout all of our schools. Just as early as recently as last week, Raphael, do you want to share what's going on with the partnership with Northwestern?
We started back in June of this year. We've been working with Holly Benz. She's an associate professor in the McCormick School of Engineering at Northwestern. And we've been working with them to try to identify using existing grants out there whereby we can modify some of our diesel-powered buses and replace them with electrical buses. We engaged with our largest busing provider, Positive Connection. We had the president of the firm as well as his VP come in, and it was in the sessions with the graduate students of engineering in there. And we looked at how that could be done in a financially sustainable way. And at the end of the conversation, even though Positive Connection have done the same conversion in Michigan, another state, based on the amount of resources that were available in Illinois, it was not going to be financially sustainable for Positive to convert the buses here in Illinois. But we also brought along Compass, which is the Head Start transportation provider here. Compass is interested in doing that, and they've agreed to retrofit 2 of their buses. So instead of running diesel, they'll be running electrical buses. And just last week, got an email from Holly Benz saying there's $25 million of new money from the stimulus fund, and there was a plan to figure out a way that funds can be used to maybe provide funding to Positive Connection, so it can be economically viable for them to convert some of their buses. So what she had asked for is that we provide a letter of support. Northwestern is working with MHOP, I believe is the name of the organization at the University of Chicago, to try to get that work done. And we promised to get her the letter of support. And once that fund is allocated, we will work to make sure that we'll do our part in converting some of the diesel buses that we're currently using to electrical buses.
And also I would like to add, we will be interviewing members from the Green Team for our master facility planning. Part of that process with focus groups and things of that nature to gather that data. And then just in full transparency on the curriculum side, we are doing some cleanup with our curriculum structure. So we don't want to add, and this is not about not doing it this year, but we want to make sure we have our structures in place so that when we bring a new curriculum that it makes sense and it flows and we are able to equip ourselves and support our teachers with the process of what curriculum looks like. And it's not just a hodgepodge of teachers having to find their own resources and things of that nature. So we definitely are interested in doing that. We actually just, we're looking for a director of science that will probably be responsible for taking on some of that work. So, and then with our schools, as stated, with Corrigan and Clark, there will be some conversations and we will be listening to gather as much information as we can. But most importantly, the funding, when we think about the large-scale projects, we're definitely open for applying for grants and things of that nature to structure opportunities to update our buildings with solar energy and things of that nature. So it's definitely something that I wanted to make sure when we met that I asked them to come and present here so they can get in front of the public and the board and really talk about the need of the needs to address the climate piece that it impacts everybody. So the last thing, there's a position that was mentioned here, and what I recommended in our meeting is that we partner with 202 in the city to potentially share that position as a unit, with both districts in the city. And I think there was some with the city, I know, I can't speak for the city, but Mayor Biss was here, and I think there could be some promise with that, and we have to just really network and make it a little bit more formal, make it way more formal in a conversation with 202 as well.
So to address one of the points raised in your presentation, one of the scopes of work that Cardigan Clark has been asked to do is energy efficiency. So that's part of their work. So that addresses that issue. That's part of the scope of work. So the
To
report
try
that
to
we
make
receive-
buildings more energy efficient, like to add insulation and to, or to look, I mean, where we get our electricity from, like what is their scope?
So what we've asked them to do is look at the way we operate our building. That's one of the scopes of work. And try to figure out a way we can use less energy and still keep our building comfortable and ambient for the folks who occupy the building. That's one of the scope of work. And I really don't believe you can do that without looking at alternative way of powering our buildings.
And I would just like to add, to be honest, I think these priorities have consistently been on the table, correct? And the difference is that when you don't have it structured, and this is not the Green Team, this is us as an administration, we have to organize, structure, and make sure that we can move strategically and plan this out. It doesn't just magically happen. And so we wanted to make sure that we got everyone at the table so that we can plan accordingly and build out the action moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Donna?
No, I just want to thank you for the presentation and the information. It's just clear that you have all done a lot of research and connections with making this happen. And thank you for the update on what the district has been doing. I hope that we can also include this in our strategic planning too. Some more comments and questions.
Absolutely. And I also think, as much as it was shared from everybody, that it's a community effort, right, to do this together. But it takes leadership, and I think as the state reorients itself financially, there will become more opportunities for decisions to be made at a state level also to reimburse school districts for this kind of work and to invest in schools this way. And that, the administration's busy with running the schools, but as a community, we can make sure that we reach out to our representatives to make sure that it's on their table too, that it certainly helps accelerate the process. Nothing that you said from me was objectionable in any way. It's how do we remove the barriers to do it as quickly as possible for the future of the kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Agenda item number 6 is the Buildings and Grounds Report Review from September 2021. There was 7 pages of detailed work that's been getting done over the first month of the school year.
Getting busy, yeah.
As we're well aware, we have a lot of very old buildings, and a lot of our old buildings need TLC. So we've been busy trying to make sure that we do the work required to keep them going, that we look out for the health and safety of our occupants, both our students as well as our staff. And I will point out, if you look at the list, there seems to be a trend there that's been going on. We have piping issues that we've been working on, and that really comes from the age of the building. So when our buildings were built, galvanized pipe were used back then. And as we since found out, we don't use that anymore. You use copper pipe now. Now, when you use galvanized pipe, as you go higher from the ground where the pipes are put in, the water pressure decreases. So what we've been doing, we've been dealing with some of that with the flushing. I'm getting granular here. And so we've been working to come up with workaround until such a time when we have the means to be able to actually go in and change those pipes. We're talking about for a building, we'll be looking at about $2 million per building to do that, just the pipes and also the construction required to do that. So what we've been doing, we've been coming up with workaround and installing boosters in those so that those facilities can be flushed. So I just want to point that out. That's something we've been working on a lot this month. And another thing I want to point out, the security camera. When when the board approved the security camera installation, they were to be done in 3 phases. So the first phase have been completed, and those are mainly the big schools, the middle schools, where we have the majority of our students. And then the second phase is actually, we're in the process of doing that, and that is to be completed by summer. The third phase is going to start this summer with the third and the final phase, and that should be completed by the time school starts next school year.
I had a question about the wiring for the cameras, because that requires crews coming into our buildings, being in the main corridors. What was the reason why we didn't push up the installation to when schools were closed and students weren't in the buildings and staff weren't in the buildings to have that work done then?
Because we did an RFP, and when we did the initial RFP, we had timeline in there, and it was awarded to the lowest qualified bidder.
Yeah.
And they prepared their work based on the award. So I don't think it's just as easy as us saying we want you to now move up the work. There are certain things we have to consider the cost of doing that. We budgeted based on doing this in phases. So if we had moved up that, there will be an increased cost that we didn't anticipate in doing that. And if I want to remind everyone who's listening, that when the pandemic started, we were not sure what the financial impact of that was going to be on our budget. So we were very prudent, and we've never faced something like this. So we decided to be conservative on the part of spending money and just keep with the schedule that we have in place of the work being done in phases.
Okay.
Plus, we didn't really know when the pandemic started how long it was going to be. In hindsight now, we saw that it's lasted longer than we had anticipated. But when it started, we didn't know. We thought it was only going to be a month or 2.
Thank you. Any other questions about the scope of work in the report?
Could you give an update about the use of premises request reviews? I had several questions about that.
Yeah. So I know one of the questions you asked was about PTA. PTA are allowed to use the building. PTA, we consider our PTA as an affiliate organization. They are an extension of the district. So whenever there's been a request from any of our PTAs to use the building, we look at the schedule and we accommodate them. So that's never been an issue. Now, what we've also looked at is any request to use a building, we talk to the principal to make sure there's nothing going on. The principals sign off on it, and we make the requester go through the application process. They have to fill out the application. We have to charge them if it's necessary. The renter also has to provide insurance that indemnify the interest of the district. So we've been very careful in reviewing the request that comes before us. But so far as I know, we haven't turned anyone who has a legitimate reason to use our building down from using it.
And I just want to say this, if something has been turned down, it could be that it went to the principal and the principal didn't move that forward, which we can definitely look into to find out. Like, we want to get out of the business of principals having to make those kinds of decisions. So we are also in a little change process. So we will find out if it's anything that you can bring to our attention, we can address it.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question about the outdoor lunch, and I appreciate the effort that went into getting those tables and chairs for outdoor lunch. I know a lot of parents and the tents, and I know a lot of parents were pushing for that. And it looks like they were delivered to all the K through 5 schools. And just an update about how many schools have been able to regularly have lunch outside, and how long do you think that will continue?
I can go first, Raphael, but just for the record, it was hard getting our hands on tents.
Yeah, I
right.
heard
So
there's a shortage.
I know some people believe that we didn't land on the tents because we got the parent calls, but it was really, we have been searching. We thought we found a company, then they end up not being able to produce them. We even ordered some tents that were that we thought were different, and they were not as great. I should have went into the tent business. We all should have. It would have been a different dynamic. We could have did everything we could to update our green schools and everything, selling tents. But we are now, all of our elementary schools, our K-5 schools, they have the tents. They're outdoors. Our middle school leaders had the option, because they have a lot more space, to do outdoor lunches or indoor, and they all decided to keep their lunches indoor. I know Shoot, for example, has a lot of space that's not used, but they've kind of create these like little cafeterias in those open corridors, a pretty cool layout. So if principals tell us, so 10 right now, if the other principals tell us they need a 10, so we will do what we can to track them down. But they've been really safe, and we've had some really, so far, successful mitigation efforts during our lunch periods.
Thank you.
What about the magnet schools? And then also, I know that there was some pest extermination. Would that also be included?
Yes, magnet schools have the same option, but we have Raphael, who's been the exterminator, taking care of the pest.
We, unfortunately, what has been happening is bees like food that are sweet. And when our children, we've had the exterminator come in. The exterminator comes in before lunch, which is when it's safe to do that. We can exterminate while our kids are there. So when he comes in the morning, everything is fine. But then when the food is being placed outside al fresco, the bees smell it and they come out. And we don't want treatment to be taking place with the chemicals with our kids. So what we've asked the exterminator to do is to keep coming just before lunch instead of earlier than that, just come before lunch and then after lunch, and to keep coming until such a time when the feedback we get from our building is that we don't have problems with yellow jacket bees anymore. And I think today this seems to be working better than before we gave the directive to come every single day until such a time when things get better.
And that's at specifically 2 schools where we've had those issues.
And I think Lincoln and King Arch has been 2 places.
And I think there was a question about, on the top of the report, item number 1, the service agreement with Aramark for the uniforms and dust mops.
So
what the cost of that was?
Yeah, we have an agreement for Aramark to provide uniforms to the guys, mops, as well as area rugs. They've done this since 1992. So what they do is they come in every week and replace them. Now, we looked at trying to...
Since 1992?
Since 1992.
Just want to make sure that was...
1992. So we looked at bidding that, and we didn't get any response. So what we ended up doing is by default, we extended the current bid that we have with Aramark at about $85,000.
Are we paying 1992 prices?
No. Prices adjust for inflation. But our goal is to find an alternative for next year. We believe we can get better pricing than what we're paying right now. But and I think the pandemic may have something to do with it. We reached out to, I believe, 12 different firms, and they just declined to submit a proposal for us. We're going to keep trying, and the goal is to find a replacement firm to provide the same product at a discounted price than what we're paying right now. That's always our goal.
In the uniform part of the agreement for the staff, does that also include outerwear for during winter for the outdoor work?
Yes.
All right. What's the cost of that agreement?
I believe it's $85,000
Okay.
for all that for the whole year. I have the amount.
And they come weekly, you said?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions about the Buildings and Grounds report?
And I know $82,651 and 66 cents. And I know there was also a question about the municipal advisors agreement. And I try to explain the answer. The answer there, the way that's traditionally done is you look at the par value of the outstanding bond, which in our case is $8.5 million.
Are you answering my question about the estimated cost?
Yes.
All right, let me at least ask that question so people know what the question is that
Right.
you're answering.
So the question was the cost of the municipal advisor for the refunding of the 2019 outstanding bond that the district is refunding. When the bonds was issued initially, the rate that we're paying was 2.76. And with interest rate being as low as they are right now, we can refund the same bond. It's analogous to refinancing your mortgage at 1.65. So we don't extend the term of the loan. We're just doing an interest rate play, paying a low interest rate for the existing bond. By doing that, we estimate that we'll realize $1.3 million in savings. And part of the process of doing that is you have a municipal advisor that actually does the bond placement. They're the ones who actually go out in the marketplace and find the person who can give us the best rate to buy those bonds. And the cost that the municipal advisor charges, what they normally charge is the value of the value of the outstanding bond, which is called the par value of the outstanding bond. In this case, it's $8.5 million. And the going rate is about $3. You multiply $3 per outstanding bond. So if you multiply that 8.5 million by $3, you get, I believe, $25,650. That's the municipal advisor's fee for this, and that is paid at the closing of the refunding in possibly October.
Thank you. I just think we refinanced over the past couple of years. We had a couple of bonds that were callable. Yes. that we did this process with, and we didn't spell out the fee for our advisor in that, and I just wanted to make sure that we noted it this time, because we're paying someone to help us find the best deal for this and to realize that savings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about item 7, the municipal advisor agreement? So with no other questions, the Personnel, Buildings and Grounds and Finance Committee recommends that the municipal advisor agreement be presented to the full District 65 Board of Education for approval.
Second? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Item 8, the reconciliation between fiscal year 22 tentative and final budgets. Kathy?
Thank you. So at the last Finance Committee, we presented FY22 tentative budget for District 65 and Park School. Today, we would like to walk the committee through the changes in that budget. The final budget will be we're not going to do a full-blown presentation, but there will be a hearing on the tentative budget, and there will be adoption vote and adoption of the final budget on the 27th of September. So I would like to ask you to go to table 35, which summarizes the changes in the revenues and expenditures by category. We had some changes. Every year we have changes between tentative and final budget. Our revenues increased approximately by $700,000. There were some additional other local revenue, primarily for child care fees for summer camps. Also, our state categorical increased by $541,000. That's due from an adjustment to early childhood grants, as well as additional federal funding that we received for Head Start. Those monies are actually coded as state fund. It's a state flow-through grant, so that's why they are included in the state aid line. We also adjusted our federal aid, Medicaid funding by $148,000. So overall, approximately $700,000 more in revenues will be expected. On the expenditure side, our expenditures are projected to increase by almost $600,000. Salaries, you will see a decrease in the salary line of $258,000. Salaries are not decreasing per se. What we did, we looked at our grants and we changed some allocations. That way we were able to put some staffing costs, primarily interventionist, into state poverty grant and Title I. So again, we just reshuffled. There's actually a lot that's happening to our grants. In July and August, reports are filed for last quarter, and based on that, we update the budget with the carryover amounts and with additional adjustments. Some benefits were adjusted up, primarily TRS.
A lot of the benefits are based on the actuals for FY21. So again, we take a look, we see all the journal entries that take place in July and August, and we again finalize benefits for final budget. You will see these large adjustments, 403,000 for purchase services, 352 for supplies and materials, and 132 for capital outlay. This is all related to the new funding for Head Start grant primarily and other grants. Because some of the funds were not spent in FY21, particularly with federal grants, we are allowed a couple months of additional spending, so we were carrying over these expenditures to FY22. And then just to end on a positive note, there was a decrease in other objects, tuition and transfers. That includes the net cost of Park School and special education tuition. We were actually able to bring the cost of Park School net cost down from 15% to 10%. And just want to remind everyone that we share the cost of the joint agreement Park School with the 202. So again, that cost was brought up. We do have to recognize the cost of Park School in District 65 General Ledger as an expenditure. So overall, not a huge impact on the bottom line. Previous surplus was about 190,000, currently at 302, so 110,000 change to the positive. Because most of these changes are affecting just current year, again, carryover amounts and adjustments related to really one-time funding sources like the Head Start. There is not a big impact on long-term financial planning, but on page 80, I believe, of the packet, we do have an update on the long-term financial projections, and you can see that actually next year, FY23, looks slightly better. Previously, we were projecting a deficit around 1.9 million, and currently that deficit stands at approximately 1.5 million. And I just want to underscore that these projections are, they change all the time. That's why we bring the projections to you twice a year. But again, with the new information, next year looks slightly better. If you compare the FY26, the difference from what we previously projected is a little bit much smaller because, again, we don't know what's going to happen, and the assumptions that we use for out years are pretty much the same ones as we did before.
And I just want to add that this board is directed Dr. Houghton, who's directed us, that the deficit that is projected for next year and beyond, the plan is that is not going to come to be. The plan is for us to reduce expenditure, starting with FY23 and beyond, to make sure that revenue balances with expenditure. And the deficit that we see long-term doesn't come to pass, that we deliver a balanced budget from now on. So we'll be coming back a little later this year with a deficit reduction plan, just like we did last year. Thank you.
And we're also working on budget book, FY22 budget book, and budget at a glance. And these documents will be posted on our website a little bit later, either I think this month. And we will be bringing a state budget form for the next board meeting. And again, there will be a vote on the budget and adoption.
Thank you. And Rafael, thank you for noting that later in the year we'll talk about what the Phase 2 plan is financially. We've already started two parts of that with the student assignment planning work and the Corrigan-Clark contract, looking at our facilities. It's not just about, staff and programs. It's also about how we're situated and organized to be as efficient as possible. And those are long-term, big projects, so those projects have already started, and we'll get updates on those as we go through the year, right? Thank you. So I think there were some questions from the committee on some of the financial aspects. You covered a lot of them.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if we're going to do the ESSER funding update, but I noticed that there were positions that are currently being covered by ESSER funds, right? I think academic tutors and guidance counselors, and I'm just curious, how many FTEs do we anticipate retaining permanently beyond the ESSER funding?
I think
Out of budget.
the way Dr. Horton has directed us and the way we're looking at this is, as we move forward in the coming years, ESSER Fund, ESSER 3 is good till 2025. It was supposed to sunset in 2024. The deadline has been extended to 2025. As we move forward and do a budget, we're going to do more performance-based budget. We know some of the things that we're funding right now. Once we review how effective those programs are, we may choose not to continue with that. So to answer your question, the way we're going to approach that is we're going to look at everything every year. And there are programs that we're funding right now that we can demonstrate is not effective. Those programs will be replaced with programs that are actually more effective, that gets us to the goal and the strategic plan that the board, that is presented to the board, a district is pursuing. So I hope that answers your question. So we're going to look at existing programs, see the ones that are working, and we'll keep those and maybe even fund them better. And the ones that are not working, we're going to have the courage, if you will, to look at them and just say, you're not working anymore. Let's replace them with something. So with that being said, if we look at how the academic centers are working and we show that they're very effective in increasing student achievement, what we'll then do is we'll look for a way to find funding for it by reducing funding in other areas, and on it will go. Thank you.
And as a reference to the ESSER money that you said is good through 2025 now?
Yes.
There's an FYI document in the agenda for those listening to see details of what we're due. We're anticipating a little over $10 million in ESSER funds. We've received about $1.4 million to date, and how it's being spent is also in that FYI for those interested in transparency's sake. Any other questions, Donna?
I think this is more for a clarification for myself. For the Capital Improvements Fund, I noticed that benefits increased even though salaries decreased. Is that due to benefits being based on the previous year and not current year?
So actually, the amounts they are showing in the capital improvement fund, they represent FY21 budget and FY21 expenditures. We actually not budgeting for any expenditures in FY22. That fund is funded with the proceeds from the bond sale. The last bond sale of 2019, those proceeds have been exhausted. So if you looked at the document, actually in the FY22 column, there is zero. So we not projecting. I think there is a little bit of fund balance left, like literally 20,000, but we not projecting any expenditures for FY22. And as far as the actuals, we had to actually make changes from the budget because we had to shift some of the capital expenditures to the fund, and just basically rearrange. We couldn't spend beyond the fund balance that was given to us. It's a special fund. It's a non-operating fund.
Does that answer your question?
I think so. Thank you.
And so the projections document, we look at that a couple times a year. When do you anticipate I don't remember where it is on our calendar when we would look at February. We'll look at
back in February.
Okay.
And the key reason is that in January, the CPI for December is released in January, third week in January. And that amount is actually what is used for the 2022 levy, so which is very important in the next couple of years of revenue, largest source of revenue, 80% of our revenue.
When you look at the table, what's known right now is obviously current year and FY23, which is the next fiscal year. The CPI is 1.4. The CPI affecting FY24 is unknown. We use a placeholder. We use our assumption that we used for years and actually been pretty close because, as you know, CPI can really fluctuate. Currently, we are using 1.5 for that year. We don't know what it's going to be. I mean, there are some economists that say maybe high, maybe low. But once we know that CPI for December, we can change that column. That's why we wait, so we can give you another year of pretty accurate information, at least on the revenue side, because it is the biggest revenue source for us. So this column in February will change to something that is more concrete.
Without any other questions, we'll move on to item 9. Or John, were there any questions? All right. Sorry I didn't check in earlier. Item 9, the fiscal year 21 ESSA report, Every Student Succeeds Act.
So back in, as part of the ESSA legislation that was passed by President Obama back in, I believe, in 2017, and the states were required to provide more direct information whereby school districts can share with the community and with the public how funds have been spent on students. The goal is to make sure that funds are spent equitably, not equally. There's an assumption that depending on the need of each particular student, the resources will go to them. For example, if you have a student who is a special needs student who has an IEP and requires psychology consultation during the school day, requires a TA, one-on-one TA, you are expected to spend more funds with that student than a general education student who doesn't require any additional services. So that's the impetus for this law. And I can say this is the third year that we're actually sharing this information. And it is as directed and desired by this legislation, whereby funds are spent equitably. We've actually done that in this district. We provide resources to students based on their unique need. And so that's what you see. And what you see here is you see some of our schools where students who are English language learners, special education students, they get more resources than general education students. I'm going to have Kathy go through the...
Thank you. So we just want to share a couple slides with you that illustrates these variances and these variances. And as Rafael mentioned, these variances are intentional, and they are a testament of our budget, our spending, supporting equity, and in our instructional and operational goals. On this slide, you can see spending per pupil in all of our schools. And as you can see, the district average is $18,159. On the left side, you see the outliers, which we will be discussing on the next slide when we just look at the K through 8 schools. For example, you have Rice that has only 24 students, so naturally spending at the outliers is very high. We have 68 outplaced students, and the spending for average spending for these students is about $48,000. Spending for early childhood center, which is in this building, is approximately 30,000. So these are specialized programs. This is a population of students that require additional resources, and that's why you see these very high numbers. And actually, these numbers are in line what we presented last year. Overall, is slightly higher. I believe last year average was about $16,400. But again, this is in line. It is expected. When we look at our schools, K through 8 schools, there is a variance. There's about 5,000 variance between the highest spend school, King Arts, $20,092 per student, and the lowest, which is Haven, $15,177 per student. And there are actually a lot of factors why you see a higher spend in some school and then lower ones. So one are those special needs students, right? Rafael already mentioned you have special education students, you have English learners, and you have low wealth students. We get additional dollars from the state and from the federal government, and they are included in these calculations. The only thing that is not included in these calculations is capital spent, community spent, so things like, for example, before and after school childcare. This is not included. Head Start program, not included. Also debt service. So we exclude all of those. But all the additional grant dollars that we receive are absolutely part of these calculations. Another big one is the size. So when you look at Bessie Rhodes, for example, that's second spent. This is our smallest school in the district, right? There's only 265 students. So these numbers are made up of the site expenditures and the centralized expenditures. Things like the cost of superintendent's office, the cost of HR and business office. So naturally, the denominator at these locations is much smaller. That's why these numbers add up. Also things like the compensation. At some buildings, you may have more seasoned employees that cost more, right, for staffing costs. That also adds up to the cost per student. But just quickly, I'll walk quickly through our sites, because we have 8 sites above the average cost of $17,165 and a 7 below. So King Arts it's one of the 2 K-8 magnet schools, and it has the highest percentage of special education students, 33%. Bessie Rhodes is already mentioned, our smallest school, but we have special programming. We have TWE at Bessie Rhodes. And it has the 3rd highest percentage of low wealth, 52%. Oakton has the highest percentage of low wealth, 57%, and the higher percent of English learners and special educations, 22 and 12% respectively. Also has special programming. We know that it's African Center Curriculum program is housed at Oakton. On the other side of the spectrum, we have schools that have lower spending per student. Why is that happening? Lincolnwood, Willard, and Haven. So when you look at Lincolnwood, approximately 350 students, actually very similar population size to Kingsley. They both have the lowest percentage of English learner students and special education students. Actually 0 of English learners at Lincolnwood, and only 8% of special education students. When we look at Willard, the cost drops down, but primarily is because of the size of the school. We have 444 students. So clearly some of the centralized costs that I mentioned, even the site cost, they are distributed among all students, like the cost of the principal, librarian, buildings and grounds team. This is divided by a much bigger population of those students. And then finally, Haven, which is the largest of our middle schools, 829 students, and has 26% of low wealth. And if you compare that, for example, to Shute School, which has 48% of low wealth. So even though it's much smaller school, but it also has not only has fewer students, but it has these additional factors related to students. So that's why the cost per student is so much higher. So this information will be shared with our community in, I think, next month. It will be part of the student report card. And we included just one more table. If you want to look how the cost is calculated, I mentioned there are site-level expenditures, and they are decentralized expenditures. So various methodologies are used depending on the expenditure. So if you have a special program, it's only allocated to that school. If the school has additional transportation or a program has a transportation cost, again, we only add that cost to that location. So these are the numbers for you.
So just want to point out that Illinois was actually recognized as one of the benchmark states to publicize this. I think we're one of the only few states that actually require school district to do this calculation and also to post it on our website and send the information on as part of the report card. And I think this is done in an attempt to make sure that there's visibility as to the way funds are distributed so that kids who need it, they get the most resources as opposed to funds just being distributed equally, regardless of special needs of kids. So as I think Kathy pointed this out too. So King Arts and Bessie Rose, they have the highest per student spending. And I think a big factor of that is programming as well as the population of the student. And also the three schools with the lowest wealth of the composition of the students also have the high spend on it. So just to wrap up, I'm very gratified. I look forward to providing us this report every year because it goes directly to the mission of this board and this committee to ensure that we practice what we preach when it comes to equity, that resources flow to the family and the students who need it, as opposed to resources just being distributed equally. So we know that some of our students, when they come in, they need special education services, they need to learn English, and we provide the resources to them, and that's the way it should be. So I know the first couple of years we did this, the state of Illinois, they reached out to us. They were really proud of how we trained it, and they asked if they could share this with the rest of the state. So we continue to do what is required of us. I just wanted to point that out. That is something we can be very proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. And probably it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think when you report out the information this way, you put at risk the conversation about why certain sites have more money spent than others. And, we have a number of programs housed in a lot of our buildings for students that have a variety of needs. And every single one of those children deserve every amount of investment in their education. Outplay students, Rice, Park, which is not in this report, and it's very easy to judge the dollar amounts, but a lot of those require a specialized view of those stories to understand the investment. Thank you for reporting out this information. Are there any questions about this report? It's pretty straightforward, and like you said, Rafael, I know the state recognized your team for this reporting a couple of years ago. I think it was the first year that people were required to do it. So well done, once again. With no further business, we'll move on to Item 10, which is a motion to enter into closed session. And I move that the Personnel, Buildings and Grounds and Finance Committee move into closed session at 5:56 p.m. to discuss employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body.
Second?
Yes.
Yes.